Because so often we say, just leave, as though it's easy, as though it's just one decision and then it's done. But it's not. It's a series of small decisions. It's a series of small things that they have to think about that could have very huge implications. Because so often people don't want the relationship to end, they want the violence to stop. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of times they don't necessarily even want to leave the relationship, but they just don't want it to be so violent. They want it to be like it was in the beginning. Now, what we also know about perpetrators is they'll often use love bombing. They'll often use techniques of manipulation to entice people.
I did not make that word up, love bombing. I could have. I feel like I absolutely could have, yes. But I've never heard of that. What is that?
So love bombing is basically when people come in really, really strong and they're like, hey, I love you immediately on the third date. And all of a sudden, you don't even know that person, but immediately there's love, there's all these gifts, there's affection, there's let me show you off to all my people. Here, look at me. Mm-hmm. But love bombing happens at the beginning of a lot of relationships where there is just that intensity of emotion. And guess what? We're all human, so guess what that means?
Feels good.
We want to be loved. We want to be appreciated. We want, especially if we came out of a home where we didn't have that appreciation, or where we had a chaotic life and all of a sudden this person is offering stability, affection, kindness, all of these things that we crave as humans. So there's a lot of reasons why I would then be really enamored by that love.
This is a little old-fashioned because I didn't grow up with social media. We actually sent paper notes to each other in school. Do you like me? Circle yes or no. But when, I would think, well, couldn't you tell this person was a monster? And it took a while for me to realize that when you meet somebody and you have that first date or that first interaction or that first hookup, whatever people call it now, that person doesn't show up and say, hey, I'm going to tell you I love you. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you you're great. Also, give me your cell phone because I don't want you calling anybody anymore. Don't have any other friends. By the way, in this scenario that I'm talking about, our perpetrator is a male and our victim is a female. By the way, I think you're a whore and you're a slut. And before you leave, I'm going to be taking naked pictures of you. And I'm going to hit you and I'm going to strangle you. And that's all going to happen on the first interaction so that you can walk away and go, wow, this person's dangerous. Because if somebody showed up and talked with you that way the first time you interacted with them, you would be like, nope, not even a pink flag. Nope, I don't want to do this. And so it is just that little tiny incremental steps, like you were saying, that get to the point where you now feel like you're so involved and you're so loved. How do you extricate? Even if you wanted to, how do you extricate? And that's where we get the people that are like, I still love this person, I just don't want this person to treat me this way.
And that's also fear for my children because I don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And also, what if I'm not there to monitor?
Yeah.
What if now he has, and I know full well that he's not capable of parenting well, and he becomes abusive when they get entangled. And so I have to be there. I feel like I have to be there. And the system may or may not give me custody. And I don't know anything about the system. So mm-hmm. He says he's going to take away custody. He says he's going to get custody because guess what? I've been depressed and anxious, and so I sought help for that. And now I have a prescription for mental health medication. Is that going to go against me in court? Because he says all the time, all of these things that I am. And when you say it often enough, your voice is louder than mine in my head. So maybe that's right. Mm-hmm. They often will coerce them. They often will, again, flip the script, shoot back to love bombing. And so a lot of this is really about keeping people off of their toes or on the backs of their heels, right? Like, I don't know what to expect next. I've been walking on eggshells this whole time. I've been waiting for him to fall back in love. And finally, he's saying, okay, I'll go to therapy. I'll do all the things because guess what? Now, all of a sudden, I'm going to go to treatment. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to do all the things because I don't want to lose you. And or nobody else is going to want you anyway. And so I put that anger back on that victim. So oftentimes it's one of two things. It's either I'm going to act very contrite and very kind and loving, and or I'm going to beat you down even further, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and verbally, so that you, again, don't have any faith in yourself and your ability to get out of the situation.
I can't charge somebody for name-calling their intimate partner, belittling their intimate partner. not making them sleep, not allowing them to sleep, not letting them have free access to certain items. But that is all, that control and that coercion and that intimidation between intimate partners is still domestic violence from an advocacy point of view.
Yeah.
But so that's where sometimes Erica and I don't always work on the same cases, because it really has to get to a certain point for my involvement to count. And one of the statistics that we talked about on Gordy's show was that you guys had almost 1,200 victims that they provided services for in 2022. We had in the entire Rice County 163 criminal cases where somebody was charged with domestic violence. So that you can see, we have people experiencing it, but it just hasn't risen to the level where I can prosecute it.
However, if the more educated you are or the less educated you are, the more likely you are to experience domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes people say, well, if I'm educated, how can I experience domestic violence? Well, oftentimes that is as a result of the fact that, well, I can explain, you know what, you just had a really traumatic childhood, and I understand. And you said you're going to go to therapy, so I'm gonna bank on the fact that you're going to follow through on that. And so all of a sudden I'm finding all these reasons, valid reasons, why this person is doing this behavior. And maybe if I do just this, I can help change it. And we also know that people who are incredibly intelligent and empathetic oftentimes can be, depending upon how good they are at setting boundaries, how aware they are of the manipulation and of those things. So oftentimes perpetrators will take advantage of people who have high levels of empathy, high levels of intelligence, and just try and knock that person down a peg or two. And then all of a sudden, that person feels even more off balance because I know I'm smart, but I'm doing these really stupid things and I can't figure this out. And so all of a sudden there's this internal crisis.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I might not know where to turn because I don't want to tell my friends because I feel like nobody else is experiencing it. And I probably should go to therapy, but then I'd have to admit it to myself and my therapist. So I just suffer in silence.
Mm-hmm.
They get to control where the children go or don't. They get to control the pocketbook. They get to, be the master of the castle. And especially if I grew up in a home where that's my ultimate goal, is to maintain that power and control just like my dad did, I'm going to do it. And I've been trained and I know the ways. And also we know that it's been supported by society and that abusers only use the amount of power necessary to maintain that power and control. So if I don't have to resort to physical violence, I'm not going to. And especially if we're upper middle class, I probably can figure out how to manipulate with my words pretty effectively. And until we as a society or prosecution or advocates or law enforcement can interrupt that pattern or that cycle and have some sort of true accountability for perpetrators and options for victims, this isn't going to change. So that's one of the pieces that I really want to get across today is we as a society have to decide that we want this to end.
It's really hard to argue against if you can say as a prosecutor, I've seen the pictures, there's bruises, there's blood, there's scratches on the neck, or this happened where somebody else miraculously was there, and you can support that or corroborate that victim's statement. But what is harder is when there's something like what we will call a protective order. So you guys have probably heard things like order for protection, harassment restraining order, or domestic abuse no contact order. That's when a judge has looked at a series of facts and said, these are so dangerous. I, as the judge, am ordering person A to have no contact with person B. Like, you can't go within a half a mile of their house. Social media, you can't ask somebody to talk to them for you. I mean, these are really big things, and if you violate it, we're going to yank you into jail and we can arrest you. And it's a new criminal offense. So this is like the highest thing that we can do with immediately getting a perpetrator off the street. From a victim's point of view, you're like, okay, I have this piece of paper, this is a court order, they can be arrested, hopefully this is going to keep me safe. You already took the courageous step to go and do this and kind of air this laundry in a public forum, and then say the person starts contacting you. Oh, baby, I love you. Please pick up. I can make this better. These are maybe texts that are coming. And that's a violation. So this person gets arrested, I charge them with a new offense. And what the victim will first hear in a court hearing is from the defense attorney, oh, Your Honor, I mean, these aren't violent. This isn't like it's a new assault. He didn't say anything nasty to her. And I've even had in a courtroom a judge say, well, Miss Murphy, he sent her flowers. I mean, at least he was sending her flowers. And the explanation is, it's not about what they said. It's the power that they're exerting over that victim to say, hey, I know you did this. I know you got this. Remember how I told you nothing bad would ever happen to me? Watch, I'm telling you. And so even hearing that still is kind of quasi okay because it wasn't violent is another way as societally we are not helping these victims and understanding, yes, this is horrible. This is almost as bad as the initial assault because you already had a judge say you can't do this. And the perpetrator's going, I don't care.
Work that I do as a friend of mine was murdered when I was in college. And one of the things that happened right before that was she had gotten flowers. I said, okay, next time I'm going to call. And so now all of a sudden you're showing up and all he did was throw a plate against the wall next to her. But that wasn't the time before when she said no to sex and he said, no, you will say yes, and strangled her before they had sex, right? So, and the other piece that I wanted to say too was, we've had, I think, 3 victims in the past week and a half all say that they use sex as a way to calm him down from literally about to murder her.
Very much.
And so we have some very high lethality cases right now, and almost all of them, without question, have used sex to be able to get out of an incredibly dangerous situation.
And the really scary thing about that is there's a lot of scary things about that, but one of the very scary things about that is the victim perceives that sexual contact as consensual. Because if you say something like, were you sexually assaulted? Have you ever been raped? I would say 8 times out of 10, you'd say no. And then when you follow up and ask a few more questions about, well, what does it look like? Then you get the, oh, well, I do it because if I don't, he's going to choke me. Or I do it because if I don't, he might do something to the kids. I do it because if I don't, she may put my photos online, right? So there's always, when I look at that, that's not consensual. That's coercion, right? But because it's used as a tool that they feel keeps them safe, the perception isn't even that is sexual assault.
Or a lot of times just even within the toxicity of the relationship. So if I don't cave now, it doesn't matter because he's relentless, so it's another week and a half of him badgering me, so I'm just going to get it over with. And so a lot of times and that's the other piece too, is, with this power and control wheel, so the outside is physical violence, that's what contains everything, but inside it's using male privilege, using children, minimizing and denying and blaming, using isolation, emotional abuse, intimidation, coercion and threats, economic abuse. All of these things help to keep that person terrified and in this constant state of freeze. We talk about the trauma states of fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And so often our clients are in that just kind of consistent state of either freeze or fawn.